Nate Flamm is an illustrator and fine artist who paints dark and whimsical recreations of classic stories and characters. He achieves a comic book aesthetic with bold shapes and vibrant pops of color. Nate turned his passion for teaching and mentoring students into the founding of an online art school called Draw Academy. Draw Academy is a personalized online art mentorship aimed at kids and adults that is designed to improve your fundamentals and make you a better artist. Join us today as we sit down with our very special guest, Nate Flamm, for a roundtable conversation covering his early beginnings and career as an artist and educator.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Painted in Color podcast. I'm co-host Lauren Brown, joined by co-hosts Mia Araujo and Eric Wilkerson. And today we are having a wonderful conversation with Nate Flamm, the owner and creator of Draw Academy, an art academy that teaches all age levels and skill levels of artists. So let's get into it, shall we? But I do want to know kind of like how you're doing, after Gen Con too, because like it was just crazy and it was definitely beyond my own expectations, but like I wanted to know how it was for you, because like this year was like a different kind of Gen Con for you.
Wait, how is it different for you?
Well, it was different for me just because it was insane. I mean, it was just, I sold out of everything. I was just like, okay, like I don't know. I didn't like do anything different aside from having a bigger table.
Yeah,
But the reception was just more than I was expecting. But
right,
I know for you, like you were using it for a different purpose this year.
right. So I haven't shown my personal work in years because of COVID, because the Gen Con booth has rolled over literally for 2 years. And then, so it was a lot of work kind of getting my personal stuff together to show. But the main thing that I'm doing is Draw Academy, which is my online teaching platform. And I had a side table that people could sign up for. And I also did a couple panels while I was at Gen Con. So
Yeah.
that was kind of
Yeah.
my main focus. And then whatever I got from art sales and kind of interest there was just cherry on top.
Yeah. That was awesome too, because like we were roommates this
Yeah.
this year, and like it was like a bunch of stuff being shipped. That was also the first time I'd ever shipped anything to Gen Con too.
Yeah, it turns
Um,
out it's really convenient. Just Amazon stuff to your hotel.
yeah, it's like always, even though I was terrified because I know 2019 was rough for you vis-a-vis shipping and
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah, that was everybody in the art show. How you doing, Nate? Better than 2019?
Oh man.
I think there
Yeah,
was no choice but to be better than 2019.
right. Yeah. So
I feel like
I lost all of my originals, and I think I don't know if my prints were in there too. Basically, all of my artwork got lost by the bellhop, and and they spent like the first day and a half trying to find it. I did eventually get it back, and then the hotel did end up comping me. The guy who was helping me was super nice about it, and I was really nice to him too. I was super patient, just because I've worked in customer service before, and I know being an asshole doesn't do me any favors.
Mhm.
So I was super patient with him, and then at the end of it, he sent me like a personal text from his cell phone saying that my patience was admirable, and I'm an inspiring person. Like, whoa, okay.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
A little empathy goes a long way.
Right, right, absolutely. But yeah, it ended up turning out fine, but it was just really hectic that first day, losing all
Yeah.
the stuff.
Yeah, I had like heard about your name even before I met you physically, just because like everybody was talking about it. They were like, Nate lost his original pieces. And I was just like, what? I was like, that's a
Yeah.
nightmare. I was like, really, like my heart was like out for you.
So now everybody knows me in the art show as that
Yeah.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like terrified to ship anything to Gen Con. But yeah, like I got like a bunch of your stuff and I got my stuff, and I was like, okay, like this is a pretty cool thing that I'm definitely doing in the future, because Amazon was mega convenient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I know like you were talking about you'd worked in customer service before.
Mhm.
Um I know, Mia, you also like, because you worked in the restaurant too. And I know like I think we had a conversation about like working in restaurants at Gen Con, but I had never done it before. But I'm just like really curious about like how you started that like journey basically, and what that was like for you.
Um, yeah, so restaurants are a really convenient entry-level job that pays you enough to keep you there, but is not, and Mia's nodding her head,
Mia
but, is,
knows.
but it is also kind of soul-crushing. And, it's a position I found myself in after doing freelance and not really enjoying it and deciding that's not what I wanted to do. And then not having a lot of other options. I have an associate's with art, which is not very valuable at all. And so that was kind of the best degree option. So I ended up working in restaurants for, I think, about 4 years, partly through pandemic stuff.
Mm-hmm. So you had an associate's for art. I actually didn't know this because like I feel like most of the people I know have like a bachelor's or no degree at all. So like
Yeah.
I'm like curious about the in between of associates and like what school was that from?
So it was a local school in Sacramento. I went to called American River. So I went there, and then my original plan was to go to Academy of Art in San Francisco, and I
Mhm.
did do that for about a year and a half, and then I suddenly like understood the concept of money being like a 20-year-old and like what my student loans were. I'm like, wait a minute, I have to pay how much per month?
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? And then I like researched like, what do I actually need an art degree for? And then like the internet was like, nothing. And you know what? I think I'm good. I'm gonna back out. And then I was like a unit or two away from my associate. So I went back to American River. I was like, well, I'll just get it now because it's so close.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, that's how I ended up in an awkward position of a degree that is absolutely worthless, where the gold foil on the degree is more valuable than the degree itself. I'm going to show it off one day and I'm going to cash it in. But yeah.
But it is valuable not having crazy student loans to pay off still.
Yes, also. And I ended up being fairly deep in the hole, which stunted me for a long time.
Mhm.
But I'm glad it wasn't what it would have been if I would have continued the rest of the time at Academy of Art, which was it was a good school. I learned a lot, but it's really expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, ridiculously like forbiddingly expensive
Mhm.
to like get a degree. Like now that I'm staring down the barrel of them after 2 years of not having had to worry about them for once, like
Yeah,
the freedom that I had just like being absolved of payments for that long, I'm like, I don't even like this sucks. Like this is really like I'm like, how does anybody do anything with student loans? Because it's crazy. And like I feel relatively lucky like to have worked in an industry where it paid relatively well so that I could support myself and like pay them off. But they're still there and like, pay the monthly payments at least. But now I'm just like, like if I want to do anything on my own, like it's
right.
extremely difficult to do so.
And so my student loans it was like over 40K, and it ended up
Oh,
being like a little over 600 a month, which is just insane. Yeah.
so even with an associate's, it was over 40K.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yeah.
2 years, right?
Yeah, but Academy of Art was insanely expensive. I don't remember how
Yeah.
much their classes cost, but fortunately, my parents ended up helping me out a bit, and I paid them off completely like 2 years ago. And
Congratulations.
I super buckled down. I was like, you know what, I need to just get rid of these, and I just threw kind of everything at it. So
Yeah.
it was so I like paid it off, and I just like broke down crying.
Oh, Nate.
It took me like a couple months to adjust to being a person who didn't owe money, but very, very big relief.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like, I mean, I can't relate to that yet, but like I can relate to like having to owe money. I mean, it's been 10 years now. So
Yeah, you just like it becomes part of your identity.
yeah, it does. And I'm just like, well, these are always like it's like a weight that's on you. So having that weight off your shoulders must have been a huge relief.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So like with that like extra income now of
Mhm.
just being able to survive without all this,
Yeah.
so how did you use that extra kind of bandwidth to go forward?
So I was still working in restaurants, and I was kind of at a crossroads where I was deciding what to do. I was actually considering going back to school, which for reasons we just discussed it seemed very daunting.
Yeah.
But you're just in this position of working in a restaurant, not really having any upward mobility because going into management is not great. So I kind of tried a couple different things. I actually took a coding class for a while because I thought I wanted to do coding, and then I did that and I decided I did not want to do that. And then I started teaching out of an art gallery and picked up some students, then kind of backed away from that, wanting to do personal work. And then during COVID, I had one of those students hit me up and like, oh, are you teaching art classes? I'm like, sure, I'll do it online. And so I kind of like credit them with starting my current program, and I started taking on more and more students and kind of found that as an out from working in restaurants was by picking up students and supplementing my income. So I worked for like 7 days a week for a good 8 months, just nonstop, getting students, teaching, working in restaurants, and just kind of killing myself to try to escape. But,
How did you, yeah.
but eventually I did. So that was in January. I made a deal in November that I would never work in a restaurant again. And so I hustled super hard last couple months of the year. And then I think I quit on like December 27th and then never went back. So
Oh, man. That must feel so good.
Yeah.
I took my my apron and my extra books and all my extra pens, and I laid them in the back of the restaurant. It's like, I'm done. I don't need you.
I was going to ask you if you burned them.
Actually, okay, so I was gonna burn them. I kept my all my black clothes and my non-slips.
Yeah.
And then I was totally gonna throw them in the fire. But then it was like a couple months past. I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Like after that, it's like not raw anymore. So you're like, oh.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you know, you just go in the trash.
Yeah. It's like, it's fine. We can just put this down. That's awesome though. Like I love how you have the exact date because you're like, that's like a new chapter, a completely new, like a new start of a new journey.
Yeah.
So like without working in customers, like, restaurants and customer service, and just having your, like basically was that how Draw Academy was born, or did that take like more like time to get that officially started?
What do you mean
So like, was it Draw Academy when you quit, or was it Draw Academy after you quit? Like
Draw Academy was while I was working.
While you were working, gotcha. Yeah. So you'd already had the identity of it and everything.
I don't remember when I officially took on the name. When before COVID, and I was teaching out of the gallery, I just called it Flamm Art Academy by my last name. And then when I started picking up students sometime last year, I started using Draw Academy, and that actually made a huge difference. People really think of you as being official if you put a name to it, and it's not just like a mom and pop type name. Like I joke, I have a 10-foot banner that has Draw Academy on it, and so people come up to me and they're like, "Is this accredited? Like, how do you find your professors?" I'm like, I just bought this big banner. Like, I don't know. I dropped a couple hundred, and now I'm like a professor and a professional. But that did make a really huge difference, and it makes it into something cohesive. And then actually I believe it was February, I trademarked Draw Academy. But it takes them, it said like here back in like 6 to 8 months. I think because of COVID stuff, it's super slowed down. So I don't know, one day I'll hear back and hopefully it'll be officially trademarked.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. It's like funny because it's like, like I just printed this like $50 on Vistaprint. Like it's
right, yeah.
but it makes it so much more real. I think that's why I'd asked like when you got like the identity, because I feel like that's really when it makes you officially decide. It's like, oh yeah, like I'm going forward with this as a business. And I think that's a big step.
Yeah. And when I first started, I actually did a lot of marketing not on social media because I kind of despise it at this point. And what I did a lot of was local farmers markets. And the first one that I did was the most bootstrap setup imaginable, where I just had like a table, I had my black tablecloth, and like just really nothing professional. I borrowed a canopy because the farmers markets require you to have a canopy for the setup. And so it was, I have a photo of it somewhere, but it was not a good setup. But basically I used it as a way to see if this was marketable and if it would work. And I got a couple signups just from that, having like the jankiest setup possible. people decided they wanted to spend a couple $100s a month on me teaching just with that. So then adding on kind of the professional side and making it look really official made a big difference.
That's really cool.
But I think it's smart to start really small. And I think that is one of the big lessons I learned this go around trying to be independent and do my own business was economies of scale and setting things up in a way that, you know, I think as artists, we have this perfectionist mindset and we have this pie in the sky, like, oh, my booth has to be like amazing. I have to spend all this money and it's got to be huge. And no, you just need to do minimum viable product and see if it works. And then if it does work, then you can double down and put more into it. So I feel like that's something that I've just learned and gotten way better and has helped me a lot with Draw Academy, which is taking things slow and like realizing the pie in the sky, being like, okay, let's cut it back though. What is the minimum that I can do?
Yeah, I think it's really important to not just try to get every single thing that you want right out the gate, because that can also be overwhelming too, and it can confuse the message of what you're trying to sell. Right. So like I also like have to kind of like I'm trying to like be better about that and not put everything forward, but just like, okay, like this is the core of what it is. And then you can start adding stuff as you're more comfortable with how you present that core.
Right. And you also don't even know what the core of it's going to be in the future, right? So if you invest in all of these things and then people gravitate towards something else, you've wasted a lot of money. But if you let it grow organically and just test the waters here, okay, people respond to this well, cool, I'm going to double down on that. Much more strategic.
Yeah. And I think the way you go about things too, like I know we talked at Gen Con just about your system and I felt like it was really unique because I feel like the complete opposite from you with my chaotic ADHD brain. But you have a system of like how you keep everything, like you keep on top of everything and organize everything. And I'm like, I was like, when you told me about it, I was just like, I need to know everything about this right now.
Yeah, I think we were at dinner and then I have a box full of note cards and I like slowly pulled it out. I just wanted to write something down. I'm like, I knew somebody was going to ask me about it. I was like, I just want to write something down.
And it came out completely organically in conversation.
What is that?
I had them. I was just like, what? Who are these here?
Okay, I have it. So
yes.
This is my box. Deborah's like, are those color coded?
Oh,
everybody says. They are. So I have like, I have purple guys. These are all just like note cards. Purple is for Draw Academy, which is the Draw Academy color. I have teal, which is for my personal art stuff. And I have blue for personal tasks. And so basically what it is, and Mia, you'll appreciate this, is the idea came from working in restaurants and that you have a ticket system. So every project, or I think of like, you have a ticket and has a bunch of food items on it. Well, once that ticket is complete and all the food is done for that table, then that ticket gets stabbed or thrown away. And so I do basically the same thing. Each one of the index cards is like a project that has multiple steps. And it's nice because I can just like kind of stack them in order for my day and I just put them on top of my desk and then I don't have to get inundated with all of them. I'm working on this one that's at the top. I sit down and I break down the project in the smallest steps possible. And then I cross them off as I go. And then once everything is complete, then I can throw it away.
It's buck wild.
And so I think it really helps with kind of your lizard brain of having like a physical manifested thing to work on. And I think it's a lot better than digital because digital is kind of too powerful, a digital to-do list, because all of your tasks are just staring at you right there in front of you. I use a digital one for years. And it's really hard to focus on one thing at a time. And I think maybe the argument for the strongest for why you would want a digital to-do list is that you can take it with you anywhere. And I actually view that as a downside because I don't want to be hanging out with my friends and then check my phone, which I was constantly doing, like, oh crap, I got to do this task. But this I can just like leave at home, but I can also take it anywhere too, right? Take it to Gen Con or I'll take it to a coffee shop and work on stuff. So I've not seen people do this online. I kind of Googled to see if there's a system like it. But to me, it's kind of a no-brainer and it really works for me.
Maybe
well, my equivalent to that is my little notepad. Like I'll write down stuff in here and I have my little thing, little string, and I'll come in here and just cross out stuff for the day that I've done,
Mhm.
or my to-do list is either in here or on the back of random junk mail. Like
Yeah,
yours is
yeah.
a lot more beautiful to look at. The back, like marker scribbles on the back of junk mail, but it's the only thing that keeps me on my brain focused. Otherwise, I'm just going to bounce and spend a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there.
Right. That's what I want to avoid. Do you
Yeah.
do like a day by day per sheet, or is there like different projects per sheet?
It's different projects. For right now, I have a page that just says concept art. Like here are all the characters I need to have finished
Yeah,
next week or whatever the deadline might be.
yeah,
But as I go through each character, I cross it off, and it just feels like each thing that I cross off makes me feel a little bit lighter.
yeah, yeah.
You
It's
know,
that lizard brain, this crossing off, throwing things in the trash.
yeah. And it's a different feeling from deleting something on a digital to-do list,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? Um, could you tell us a little bit about, since we've been talking about it's Draw Academy,
Academy.
Draw Academy or
No, hey, Draw Academy.
Draw Academy.
Academy?
One word.
Okay, Draw Academy.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that? If you had tell us your pitch. Like what, I mean, you've been doing it for a while, so tell us what it's about. Who is this aimed at? Is this just for adults? Is it for kids or?
Yeah, so it is private and group online art lessons. I do everything on Discord digitally, so it makes it accessible.
Awesome.
It is for kids and adults. Obviously, private lessons is easy to do that. It's tailored for the student. So my youngest student is 10. My oldest is 47, so it's any age range. And then I have a group class, and the group class is ongoing. It's kind of like a general overview of art. It's good for beginners to intermediates, and we change topics every 6 weeks. So we pick an area of focus, whether we'll draw eyes or we'll work on light and shadow or figure drawing. Right now we're working on hair, and then we just do kind of an overview for 6 weeks. And yeah, that's pretty much the.
How long are each of those sessions?
They're all an hour.
Okay,
Nice.
right on.
Yeah. And how frequently a week do they meet, or do they meet once a week for an hour?
Yeah,
For the
everything is once a week.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I love that model too. Like I'm like being a professor teaching is something that I'm interested in going in hopefully very soon, fingers crossed.
Mhm.
But how do you determine like what is in your curriculum? Like where do you figure out like where to start? Like I'm sure it's like obviously foundations, but like what makes you decide where to start in your foundations, and like how do you go up from there?
That is a good question. You know, most people have an interest in drawing similar things like people, figure drawing, portrait, light and shadow. Most people want to do portraits.
Mhm.
And so, especially for that, I feel like I have a pretty good system nailed down. And honestly, it's mostly just trial and error. I've been doing it long enough, and I've written up some documents that I kind of follow for, of course, because I'm super organized,
Yeah.
for curriculum. But at any given time, I'll have multiple students going through portraiture, and I kind of still do this. My system's a little bit more solidified now, but I'll kind of like play around and have two students working on the same level of doing portraiture. I'm like, I'm gonna like kind of show you this, and I'm gonna show you this, and then like kind of see how they do and see how they glom on to the techniques, and see how quickly they improve and what works. And there's definitely an art form, a real balance to teaching in a lot of different facets. And one of the big things that I learned was breaking down concepts really, really small and letting students work on it for a long period of time. The other thing is, what I see online for tutorials a lot is people are focused on analytics. So they're focused on, with portraiture, stuff like, to me, that's like eyes are halfway, down the head. There's one eye length apart for the eyes, and then usually two here, and then the corners of the mouth line up to the pupils. These very like kind of structured analytical things. And I think that's useful, but what a lot of beginners really need are skills that are more fundamental than that. They need to understand 2D space before they understand 3D space. So understanding just relative size and distance and how to nail that down on the page, that comes first for me. So, kind of like the classic, you draw a square and then you divide that in half. And then you think about, okay, from like this distance to this distance, how many of this shape will fit into this shape? And doing super fundamental stuff like that, because it doesn't matter if you, know what a Loomis head is or know how many eyes wide the head is if you don't have the accuracy to actually represent that on the page.
Yeah. And I find especially too when people don't when they haven't been drawing their whole lives or just getting into art, there's like so much that you don't realize how that innate knowledge that you just learned over time. You take it you don't know how you take it for granted. And so like really going back to like the basic fundamentals is really important to be able to hey, this is like the basis level of how to get started. This is how space works when you're drawing it in 2D. Like that's, it's so far back that it's hard to even conceive of getting back to that fundamental.
And I'll give you another example. One of them that I kind of realized lately that I have to teach is look at the reference more, because students will just they'll glance at it and then they'll just draw the thing. And I'm like, what, you gotta look at the thing. You can't just look at it once. You're not gonna memorize everything. I need you to be constantly looking back and forth at the reference. So that's something that's super fundamental, and you're not really going to learn online. I haven't really seen any tutorials for that, and also you're not gonna get that by doing it on your own. You don't have somebody who's like, hey, look at the reference.
Yeah, they need the discipline for sure to get in there, and it's just hey, you have to study this and really take it to heart before you're just because a lot of people, especially when they're younger, are impatient. And this is something I was also curious about, because adjusting your teaching style between different ages, I'm sure that's a challenge too, because that's a big range to teach between. So how do you teach an older person versus a younger person?
The real difference, besides the degree of difficulty that I'm giving them, is that kids need to eat dessert more often, and adults are cool with eating vegetables all the time. And that's especially true with an adult. I had a student who did composing music for video games. And then I currently have another student who is a professional artist who goes to conventions, and I have another student who's a graphic designer. People who have these kind of skill sets, whether they relate to art or not, have an understanding of mastery and what it takes, and they know that you have to really buckle down. Hey, I want you to draw 100 boxes this week, and they're cool with that. An 11-year-old is not going to have it. I draw a lot of Pokemon with 11-year-olds, and that's fine. It's just where they're at. And I kind of focus mostly on fundamentals, but illustration is my passion, and I sneak in the creative things when I can. And with younger students, you just have to do that a little bit more frequently, where let's do something creative and illustrative, and I'm gonna kind of attach a lesson to that. And it also depends on per student, right? Everybody is different. It's not true for all younger kids or adults, but it's very much my onus to read that with the student and see how they're doing, and pay attention to things like just what their mood is in class while we're learning it, or what their output is if their output changes. And I kind of try to push as much as I can, and then I see that, okay, they hate this, they're not having a good time. And I also try to keep the conversation open, hey, how are you doing? Do you hate this? I hate this. I'm okay, let's do something else. If we're just doing still lifes all day, and I'm I tell them this isn't normal school. You can tell me that you're not having a good time, or you don't understand something. I try to keep that communication open. But then you build in breaks. I'm okay, you know what? Let's stop on the light and shadow stuff for still lifes, and let's draw some Pokemon. We're still going to apply light and shadow to it, but now we can be a little more creative. We can make up our own Pokemon, make up the lighting for it. and still learn. And with younger students, they have so much time that I push my students a lot. I can be a fairly intense teacher, and I think my students, or at least some of them, like me for that. But being younger, you have so much time to get this mastery. I'm not super concerned that you're grinding. I think a big part of art is developing passion, and I see passion as a type of skill. And so like my experience, I don't know how it was for you guys, but I didn't take a proper art class until I went to college, very, very expensive college. And during that time growing up, I was drawing all the time, but without instruction. And even though I wasn't improving, I was developing passion. And so when I got to college age and it was time to learn the hard stuff and really grind, I had so much passion behind it that I was okay to do it. I was okay to really push through and work super hard. So I think being a teacher, you have to cultivate both. Teaching really is not just about teaching technical things. It's also like, hey, art is fun and enjoyable.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I was just going to say I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like there are a lot of schools that are just mainly focused on the technical skills and just beating into the students like, you will not get a job if you don't learn all these things, to the point that it is painful for the students. And the fact that you're stopping at every point and saying, are you actually enjoying this, is so important. And it's not something to overlook, because that's what will get you through all the, all the studies, I think, is if you're still enjoying part of it, so.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people who I had gone to college with, like between both schools, a lot of them, just like the educational part of it, because some of their professors were just inflexible, they lost the passion for their art, like versus like actually cultivating more passion for it, which you would think would happen. But that was because the teaching styles were way too rigid. And there were certainly things that like I thought I had passion for, and then it got burned out of me because it was a bad instruction. And I had such a bad experience with it that I was like, okay, I don't think I even want to like do animation anymore, because I'm just not having a good time and no one's really teaching me like what I need to be learning from it. Like my school wasn't ready to teach that, and it showed, and it burned it out of me. So like I think that it's really, really important to have that empathy. And as a manager, this is something that I've had to learn too, of how to adjust your communication styles per each person and making sure that they're all getting what they need, because at the end of the day, everybody who you're teaching is an individual. And being able to cater to those individuals and give them what they need is super important. So, that's awesome that you do that. Like, to echo Mia, like that's very, very valuable.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, there's definitely a balance, right? There's a certain point where, the 11-year-old wants to draw Pokemon. I'm like, no, we got to work on some fundamentals. We've been drawing Pokemon a while. And like, to kind of echo what you just said, I could have every student sit down and draw 10,000 circles to begin with, and that might make you the best artist. That might be the best thing for you. But if that makes you hate art and then quit and never do it again, then what's the point?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to keep them into it and loving it. So another thing I'm curious about that I didn't really get to dig into, like when I was talking to you at Gen Con, was like with your own art, what gets you all excited about it? Like what motivates you to create your personal art?
So I have been mostly burnt out on doing art for the past couple of years, but I'm getting back into it. And one of the big factors with that is doing Draw Academy. And it's actually, I remember talking to Drew Baker a couple of years ago, and he was saying how starting a print business was the best thing he ever did for his art. And I feel similarly about Draw Academy, not having the pressure to produce something and sell it, but actually do it for fun. Because that's what I did as a kid, was just make art for fun. And I think that's what sapped all of the enjoyment out of it for freelance. So now I get to do Draw Academy as my main money earner, and then do my personal art on the weekends and for fun and enjoy it. But right now I have a fairy tale series that's kind of like a dark and whimsical take. So I do illustrations for that, and the direction I'm moving is kind of like these cinematic widescreen shots, and then I do like little stories that accompany it.
Yeah, I always loved seeing your vignettes of just like those fairy tales that you have your take on. And like your painting style is just, you know, is super cool too. It's like I feel like it's very buttery. Like that's how we always describe it. Like you have like an obviously like amazing understanding of light and shadow and form. And I always love seeing your art.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like, was that always like that? Were you always into fairy tales and things like that? Or were you into like, what were you into as like a kid? Like what did you nerd out about?
Man, I don't know, normal kid stuff. I played a lot of video games, so like Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, the stuff that like influences all of us. Um, but fairy tales I came to several years ago, and it just felt like a really good fit because that's kind of what my style was. It was dark and whimsical, and it didn't really fit any neat slots. Which I had difficulty with before, but I felt like it was perfect for fairy tales because of their nature, how they're like, they're a little bit dated, so they can be kind of silly and weird, but then they're also like really dark and terrible. And I like kind of just pushing both of those aspects, making it darker and more whimsical.
That's awesome. With your students too, do you like once you teach once you teach them the foundations, as if you ever stop learning them,
Right.
like do you focus on the creative personal work side of it too, or like what people's point of view is after like doing the fundamental stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. The especially for the private lessons, it's tailored to the student. So again, I kind of go off of what they want to do. They're kind of ultimately dictating the path, and I'm their guide. For the group lessons, I do have built-in creative stuff where we'll do 5 weeks of technical stuff. So if we do like figure drawing for 5 weeks, in the last week, then it's okay, take the skills you just learned with figure drawing and then make up your own character using the figure drawing skills that we just learned. And then same thing with the private students is helping them with the creative stuff too. So yeah, it's up to them. If that's something that they want to focus on, then yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that format.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really fun too, because then you get to be more of a mentor, and you get to talk really, like the kind of abstract theoretical stuff is the really fun stuff to talk about. And especially when you get students up to that level that can have a conversation, and once they learn the fundamentals and they're with me after a year, I'm like, okay, you're at level 0 now, we're ready to play the game.
Now we're getting started.
Right.
Do you have students come through that have like high expectations on like where they're artistically going to be at the end of your course?
At the like in general, or after they completed a certain amount of time?
I think after they completed a certain amount of time.
There's nobody that I don't think that they have a concrete idea of, they expect to be Kim Jong-gi after like 6 months of lessons. I don't know if anybody has like a particular expectation for a time frame, but I do a lot of prefacing, and I just let them know like, hey, you're going to make a lot of bad art and you're not going to like it. And I feel like being upfront about that with people is really important. I'm not saying that you're going to be a pro after you take a couple lessons from me and it's going to be crazy amazing. Like, you're going to get frustrated. It's going to get hard. And I always, I pick an arbitrary number like, hey, you have 10,000 terrible drawings inside of you. You just need to get them out and you need to put them on paper. And then after that, you're cool. And to me, putting any kind of number on it is really, it feels better. It's there's actually a goalpost there. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and just knowing that improvement will happen. Another thing that I do that I think is really effective that more artists should do, and as I go forward with Draw Academy and I build it out, I feel like this would be a really cool feature to have built in. But now I just do it manually, where a student will come and they'll turn in drawings and they might be frustrated where they're at. And I say, okay. And I scroll back like 2 weeks, a month, 4 months. And I do a side by side. I'm like, yo, this was like 2 months ago. I'm like, that is insane. And like, so like beginners don't get it. Like, your art from 2 months ago, you're 8 times as good as you were before. Could you imagine if I did paintings for 2 months and was 8 times as good as I am? I am so jealous of you. And then another thing that I did to give some perspective is I had a student, 12. She's like frustrated with her stuff, and she's like, "Oh, you're so good at art. Like, I just don't get it." And I'm like, "Okay, you know what? Next class, I have a surprise for you." And so I dug out some of my old drawings from when I was 12. I'm like, "You're like 4 times as good as me. Like, I'm so jealous of you. You're like, you don't understand." So putting it in like an actual like visual context, I feel like it's helpful, and like just reminding people that you're making progress, and really there is no destination, and that's really hard to measure an artist's skill like in every facet. You can't really say that, there's no like hard marker of where you're at. There's so many like kind of disparate skills.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
story relates. Yeah. Sorry.
I
It's
have
so
a
fun.
I have a lot of students that think that they're going to be Riot Games ready, and I'm like, no, that's not. You may have splash art dreams, but they're going to be dreams for a little bit longer.
Right.
Like, you still learning how to paint a face, so like, calm down.
And are you teaching college, high school?
Oh yeah, online. But it's dealing with not as young as 10, but dealing with industry career changers and things like that. But
Mhm.
it seems like your group are a lot more realistic with their expectations. But no, that's a great thing that you have going on here, and that you're able to tap into uh, young artists, and kind of encourage and not only encourage but strengthen their technical skills at the same time. And I think that's just fantastic.
Thank you.
They didn't have anything like that when I was 10. I think that art instruction school thing where you would draw something and have to mail it in,
Uh-huh.
and then it would be critiqued, and they would mail you back a critique.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, this is stupid. I'm not doing this.
Right.
But well, the kids they don't understand how great they have it.
Yeah. There's so many resources out there now, and like it's also so much more affordable than all the options that we had used to be, because like before it was just like you had like some random like small art schools, but then mainly like the end goal was like, oh, you have to go to art college, you have to pay all this money that we didn't even know about because we were 18 years old and like barely adults. And that was definitely the case for me, where I just didn't understand the volume of money that I was going to have to owe. And if I did, like, things might have been different. I don't regret it, but like things might have been different. And being able to have accessible, like more affordable education that teaches them, probably a lot more than you would learn in college. I think that's super valuable. And like, it's lucky to have, like, they're lucky to have that. And it's funny too, because like the way you're describing your students reminds me a lot of, I have like 9 nieces and nephews. So 4 of them are really into art. And so I get to be the cool aunt. And so I'm also like trying to teach them kind of like how to like have fun, but also like learn how to eat your vegetables a little bit. And like learn, you should try to start learning some fundamentals. Like you have an artistic aunt, like you should probably like, hit me up a little more. Right. But it's like that same deal where my niece will always be like, Auntie Lauren, like, how are you so good? And I'm like, well, first off, I'm 35. So like, I have years on you, but also here are my old sketchbooks, and like, here's where I started. And like, actually like this, you're better than me and you have so many more resources than I do. So it's like really getting them to understand that, and understand like you have the world in front of you, like take advantage and have fun. And that's just the coolest thing. Man, I wish I had that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That would have been really powerful.
I think that's why it's viable for me to be able to do Draw Academy, is because schools still don't have the necessary art programs.
Yeah.
It's just, there's really not much art education. And like I said, I grew up super passionate about drawing, and I didn't have any instruction. And so that's what I try to bring to my students, be that instructor I wish that I always had.
Yeah. That's a really great goal to have too.
Thank you.
Nate, I
Yeah.
was wondering if you're the only professor at Draw Academy right now. Like, do you do everything yourself?
I am currently. I'm working on expanding. So I had some substitute teachers cover for me while I was at Gen Con and at vacation this past week. And a couple of them are going to take on some permanent students as soon as I can fill those slots. So that's what I want to do with Draw Academy. The kind of next step is not just me teaching classes, but create a platform that has resources and then bring on other teachers to teach students.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. Is that like, I know that's the immediate plan, but like, what are the long-term plans for Draw Academy? Like, what do you like if you had a vision of like what you wanted to be in, like, I don't know, 10 years? What is that vision?
So I want to do the ultimate expression I want is Duolingo, but art lessons. So kind of art lessons that are broken down into small chunks and are put in a particular order that makes sense. And instead of like switching between languages, you can switch between like figure drawing, portraiture, different focuses. But that is something that's what I call phase 3 that I'm going to roll over with phase 2 of bringing on teachers is creating more online content and tutorials. Right now, I'm actually in the process of writing a business plan to try to like dial everything down and be really serious about it. But after that, then I'm going to start creating tutorial content, and that'll just help the platform grow. So it's like not only do you have this instructor, but you have these other resources that goes through the fundamentals.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that vision. Like, it's like I want to have your app like on my phone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be really cool if it got really big. And like, you know, if you're like, oh, you know, I'm gonna go to some foreign country, it's like, oh, you should get on Duolingo. Like, that's just people say. If you're like, oh, I want to make art, it's like, oh, you should hop on Draw Academy. So the idea is that I'd want it to be like a freemium type content, and then there'd be a premium option.
Yeah, where you can like kind of get the more in-depth lessons and like, you know, the extra content.
Or there's like critiques that come with it.
Right.
Yeah,
because the
like
free
extra-
content hooks them in.
Yeah.
And if it's just enough that for them to go, oh, I enjoyed that. Oh, and that's not that much. Okay, I'll do that.
Right.
But then you're already in their head. So
and then also maybe less cynically, it's nice if more people can enjoy Draw Academy, and you know, you could have charge up front and then a small percentage of people will do Draw Academy and be very insulated. But if it's free, then more people will do it.
Yeah.
Leave a small percent of people that do it.
Yeah, Eric, why you gotta make it sound so devious?
No, because
That's great.
you know, I deal with people that have gotten their entire art education through YouTube videos.
Yes.
And they're getting their information from YouTube, you know, whatever those YouTube stars, whatever their names are, that stumble downhill into a finished product. And then the artists at home are watching that going, wow, so that's how it's done. And you spend your time just undoing that in an actual classroom, and it gets a little, I mean, I'm cynical after a while, but I don't know, that's just what I've dealt with. But I think it's just it's a fantastic business model for you as a person. And I mean, before the pandemic, actually thinking about doing exactly what you're doing, but not through online, not through Discord or anything like that. I was actually putting together an entire business plan to, you know, take to a bank and get a business loan and, you know, rent out a space somewhere and, you know, offer drawing classes the way people offer karate classes.
Sure.
And then we all stayed in the house.
Yep.
So I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't do that.
That would have sucked.
Yeah.
So yeah, that again kind of goes back to the economies of scale where, you know, maybe there's a future where there's a Draw Academy physical school, but, and I was teaching out of a gallery before, but I had to pay for the space. And Discord is $10 a month to do the premium and have high quality streaming. And students like it too. It's convenient for them, right? They can be anywhere and hop on lessons. So
yeah, it's just so much more accessible, even though I I love the idea of learning art in a physical space just because that's how I learned. But now that everything is so much more connected and convenient, it's just like having a physical space is just so much overhead. I'm sure you definitely need money to start up a business of your own, but having a digital business, it's so much less that you have to put into it. It always blows my mind how things have changed so much to, everybody can find this. But yeah, it's like what Eric was saying, where the danger is for these young people learning how to do art from TikTok or YouTube. Sure. My niece was following art tutorial. I found out she was following art tutorials from people who didn't really know how to draw on TikTok. And it was just the sirens went off. I was like, no. Do not learn from them. They have not even, they are teenagers. Please do not. So it was terrifying. So having a more official, a person who knows how to do this and knows what their fundamentals are, that's just so much better.
TikTok users don't buy big banners, right? That's how
you're right. Yeah. It's the $50 Vistaprint banner. You gotta let them know that you're here for real.
Right. Not unless they're doing some kind of stupid video, dancing in front of it, or dropping it and then catching it and then unrolling it and some.
Eric, you're just making us all seem old, dude. You're just aging all of us.
Stop aging all of us, Eric.
Gosh dang kids on the top tick.
My lawn.
So I will say for having a physical space, there are advantages. And when I was teaching at the gallery, it was a lot easier for me to get students because I'm competing with every art school in Sacramento, which is very few who are actually doing that. And so I think I got a URL that was artclasssacramento.com. And then just not having much competition was great, but doing online, your competition is everybody on the internet. So it's a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
So there are advantages to both. Something else I should mention that I do that I think is kind of unique is I really like the gamified learning, which is kind of what I was talking about with the art, but Duolingo. And I did martial arts for a long time. And so I kind of co-opted that system. I send badges to my students, and there's a system where every time you post a completed drawing, you get 50 points. And then at 2,500 points, then you level up. And I have these small little badges that I send them in the mail. And to me, that's it's a reward for them doing the work and getting better. And you don't have to participate in, right? If you don't upload much stuff, then you're not going to get any badges. But them creating a lot of artwork is kind of the intersection of what everybody in the situation wants, because if they create a lot of artwork, they're just going to get better, which means that they're going to enjoy art more, and they're also going to get better at art, and they're going to like it. I'm going to like it. So it's just a good way of incentivizing. And it's a system that I want to continue. And it's similar to any other app where as you do this gamified learning, you get badges. And my vision is that you would get a digital badge in the freemium version, and the premium that you pay for, then I would still send you a physical one in the mail, trying to kind of bridge that gap.
That's awesome. I love that. And I also love that it's drawing from your past influence and experience, is just the way that you would set up this business of, having the video game influence plus your martial arts influence, and knowing that having that reward at the end just makes it feel all the more worthwhile. It's a really, really cool way to go about it. How do students respond to that? Getting badges, are they super into it? Do most of them participate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they post art, so I do kind of a weekly tracking, all the art that they did during the week. And then every Friday I post a scoreboard, and it shows all of the art that they've created so far. And it's an Excel doc that updates their points, and it has a list of all the levels. There's 20 levels, and it has different colors. Everybody starts at level 0, dioxazine purple, and then it goes through different paint colors as they level up.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so yeah, so I encourage them to post like where I'm like, where are you going to put your badges, guys? And they'll like put photos in the chat, and then I do the same thing. So I also, the group class students and the private students and myself, I upload artwork with them, and there are things that I'm practicing and learning, and I'm working on anatomy right now, and that's something I do every day. I work on a little bit of anatomy practice, and when I finish drawings, I upload them to show them, hey, I'm also learning too, and this is what I'm learning. And then I count up my own points. So I think I'm like level 7 right now. And when I post, I'm like, don't let me beat you guys. I'm catching you. I'm passing you up.
It's like race against the professor.
Yeah, makes it fun.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I want to get into teaching too. Is just because I know that by rote, like I still study like and everything, but not nearly enough as like I should be. And I know that like when you're teaching, like you have to be on top of your stuff in order to be able to teach it properly. And so like keeping myself sharp by teaching is like something that I've always wanted to do. And that's a really good way to like hold yourself accountable, is to like, hey, like I have to be the example for these students to make sure that they're also like knowing that I am setting the standard, and they can choose to beat it or underperform if they want to, but you're there like doing your best as well. And I just think that's awesome.
Yeah.
But Mia, what were you about to say?
Oh no, I was gonna ask a different question about I kind of want to go back to how you were first promoting your school at farmers markets, and I was just curious why you chose that. I mean, aside from it just being a physical place to promote your work as opposed to social media, but why farmers markets in particular?
Mostly that, just because you can have this one-on-one interaction, have a conversation with people. And then at the same time, it was easy to find my target demographic because there are a lot of families at farmers markets.
Okay.
And I realize that's a really huge deal with marketing. It's just target demographic. I also realize I need to do more anime shows, which I never thought I would say out loud. That is very much kind of the age range that I'm looking for.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, and also, I'm the only art school at farmers markets. There's none other.
I was
Right?
gonna say that. There's no competition.
Yeah. So like everybody's gonna stop by my booth.
That's cool.
That's a really good way to go about it. Honestly, that's super smart. I'm also actually leading to that, because I also wanted to ask a question about this. Knowing that you don't use social media that much, how else do you advertise Draw Academy?
Those are the kind of main thing right now is doing shows. Most of my private students, I've been lucky, they have stuck with me for a really long time. I've had very few private students drop out. And of course I do word of mouth and like a referral program. And then what little I do for social media, I was doing a YouTube live draw along thing for a little while. But now I'm looking to step back into social media. I'm probably going to put most of my efforts into YouTube, doing tutorial type stuff.
Have you ever thought about doing TikTok as well?
Yeah, I thought about it. I actually was doing a Draw Academy Instagram because the amount of content I'm producing is a lot. With all these students, I have all of these finished drawings, like 60 plus drawings a week. And so I was posting a lot on Instagram, and that started going pretty well. But then as I was doing my business plan, I realized that most of my target demographic isn't even allowed to be on Instagram, which is kind of like the 10 to 14 age range. And I think YouTube's going to be a lot better for that. So I'm going to put my efforts that way. Yeah.
And I think there are also a lot of young people on TikTok as well. So like, that's why I asked, because it seems like
maybe I should do TikTok. I think I'm too old. They'll do like an age check and say I'm not allowed.
No, that's not how it works.
there are art fundamentals tutorials on YouTube Kids, where like a guy, I know there's one specifically where a guy and his son are like, let's draw a dragon. And it start off with basic shapes, and then the kid is following along, but the camera is pointed and it's like a split screen. So you get to see the kid and the father do it side by side, and kids can follow along. My daughter does that. She's like, well, why don't you show it like this, Dad? I'm like, what? I get called out for not teaching my kid how to draw a dragon properly. But she has she was 5 at the time when she discovered these videos, and she'll still follow along today. And I mean, I don't know how you have to link that within the program in order for it to come up in a YouTube Kids search. But
I mean, 5 is pretty young. I don't offer, the youngest I usually take is 10. I've taken
right, but that mean that they would all, I mean, depending on
I don't know what
parents,
YouTube Kids is.
I know, but depending on the parents, the parent giving the kid access to an iPad or something like that, at what age they give it to them, you'd still have, I mean, the YouTube Kids content is still going to come up in regular YouTube, but it would be something that might also be accessible to a 5-year-old that might go, hey, I really like Pokemon. What's that free hook, right? That 5 years down the line, somebody goes, hey, I want to take that class. I was learning so much through those YouTube videos. That's so much fun. And oh, mom, there's a class that I can actually pay and take, rather than buy me those new shoes or something like that, But that's awesome.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of experimenting that needs to happen, and I'm sorting that out right now. But there's also something to sticking to one media and working through all the kinks, and really just committing to something.
Yeah, I think once again, like we talked about earlier, not overwhelming yourself with too many different options all at once is really important. So like once you've I feel like once you feel like you've mastered one media, I feel like that's when you can move on to the other and be like, okay, like now that I feel like I'm good here, we can expand the platform to this social media and see how it goes there. Because I feel like if you already hate social media, which I do too, so I completely relate, and like you don't want to do everything at once, it just becomes all overwhelming. So I think slowly kind of like, okay, like I'm good on Discord, I'm good with how I advertise this. Let's start trying YouTube and like get that into the routine and like slowly expand from there. And I think also like as you're expanding a business too, it's important to, you said you wanted to get more professors. So it's important to like have your team. So like, would you ever think about getting somebody to like manage the social media aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that having assistants and just help do anything in the business is such a huge help. I actually had an intern for a little while, which was super awesome. And then now my dad actually helps me out because he's retired and happy to do it. So yeah, it's very sweet of him. But yeah, that is something that I want to look to, and I'm going to look into some options, see what I can do there.
Yeah.
But for the content that I want to produce, my hope was that it would kind of be in line with what I want Draw Academy to be in the future. So making lessons and content that is the content that would be in the Draw Academy online Duolingo type app. So creating articles and creating videos that goes with that, so I can kind of like give free content and market it, but also grow that at the same time. And then we'll see, maybe there'll be demand to do other videos. Maybe I'll have to borrow Eric's kid and have her draw along with me, and
she would be all for that. And once YouTube followers so bad, but I refuse to let her put content on the platform.
Understandable.
But yeah, if you need a guinea pig, you let me know and I will hook you up. All right.
Cool.
I also have nieces and nephews that you can borrow as well if you ever need it.
Great. You could just ship them here,
Yeah. I'm like, what age are you looking for? Because my niece is 13. So
that's perfect. Perfect. Give them all to me just in case,
Okay, cool. I'll send you the whole bundle. You can figure out which ones like want to draw and which ones don't.
We'll do like an art sweatshop.
There you go.
Just tell them it's a trip to
This
California.
is how Nike did it, man.
They need to know the fundamentals of hard work, like what it means to work really hard.
Should be happy to be learning art lessons.
Right. the worst. I'm so glad that like we're becoming wise to that mentality. It's like, oh, we don't have to like destroy ourselves anymore to like, to learn this craft. Like we can just have fun with it. But yeah, it is important to learn how to like, buckle down and do the good stuff. But I'm glad that you're giving a mix of both. And it sounds awesome, honestly. Like I'm really excited for you.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to see like where it's gonna go, from here.
Yeah, no, I was just really impressed overall, just how you've been able to, like how you segued from restaurant work to basically supporting yourself teaching and getting time to make your art. Like that's literally living the dream. And it's also was just cool hearing about how you organize everything and stuff. So I just learned a lot listening to this. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I feel like that the work-life balance thing is super important. And the way that I've structured my students is Tuesday through Thursday, I kind of teach all day. And then Friday, I have an admin day, and then I give myself the rest of the days off.
That's awesome. That's a really good model.
I try to put Draw Academy away on the weekends, and I mostly do, but getting better at it.
Well, it's really hard when you have a business to like not want to work on it every single day. And so yeah, like I was actually going to ask you about that too. I forgot I was going to that like organizing your time and how you generally manage that. Like was it always that way? Like did you always give yourself days or did you have to work into it?
It once I went full time in January, I didn't really have to work at a restaurant. It was a little bit more accessible for me to break up my days more. I don't recall exactly when I started doing it, but I have the set days that I just mentioned, and then I do Monday as like a personal chore day, doing tasks there. But it just makes sense. I think it's a little bit more effective to compartmentalize everything into one day.
Yeah, that's really nice. I think I could certainly learn that lesson. I'm just like, oh, there's days where you can put the work away. And I think that's really, really smart so that you don't burn out on, on this thing too.
Right. And it's not easy to do. You kind of have this momentum when you are working on a project, kind of both ways, right? Like if I'm working on something and I really want to see it to completion, then I want to carry it through the weekend. And the same thing's true if I'm working on like personal art stuff. I have to learn to kind of put it away or like go to bed at a decent hour. I feel like that's always a struggle. It's like, you're painting till midnight and you're like, I'm not being effective whatsoever. I need to put this away, go to bed and be refreshed. Martial arts was a big part of that taught me a lot of discipline. So people will ask me like, oh, Nate, you're so disciplined. How do you do? I'm like, I don't know, man. You just decide. And there's other systems that I use. I have like daily tasks that I do every day, and I have a whiteboard where I cross those off, and I use that to hold myself accountable. And I make things accessible for like art practice. So I have like my desk set up in the morning. For every morning, I make coffee, and afterward I do 25 minutes of practice. And my sketchbook and my pencils are already laid out. So I think setting up yourself for success is really important. So it's not just all willpower, but designing your environment that you're in to not work against you, and then using systems like the crossing off boxes when you complete stuff is really valuable.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh yeah, I think this was something that we talked about a little at Gen Con too, but like your system that you use, do you teach that to your students, and how do they take it if they do?
System for practice.
Oh, it's just system for like organization and like practice and all that stuff. Like basically what you do in your own time.
Yeah, absolutely. I often have this discussion a lot, especially with new students, about practicing and how to fit that in. And it's often a discussion, and I will tell them like, hey, this is my system. This is what works for me. I'll tell them my routine and just kind of offer it up to them. And I ask them like, what's a plan for you? When is a good time that you can make art? So what I tell my students is 25 minutes a day, every day ends up being about 3 hours a week. If you can do that, you're going to improve really quickly. And then we talk about a time of day, and not just a time of day, but tying it to particular activity. So it's like, what is a thing? Is it like right after you get home from school? Is it immediately after eating dinner? Is it after you make coffee in the morning? And really coming up with a plan with them. And this is a conversation that's really important, because similar to kind of how we're talking about art as a technical skill, but then art also as passion, well, there's also this skill of showing up and being organized. And I can teach you all the fundamentals in the world, but if you don't go home and practice, like, it does not matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really important. And I think also just like knowing what systems work best for like people's already existing tendencies is super important too. So I think oftentimes we try to fit ourselves into this like pre-prescribed box of like, oh, in the morning I ought to do this, and like, you know, in the evening I ought to do that. And the same system doesn't work for everybody at all. Everybody's minds work differently. So
Right.
it's good that you work with them for their own needs and see how they organize their own stuff in their own way.
And
I
there's
think that's smart.
always a lot of trial and error for myself and students.
Mhm.
We'll come up with a plan, like, okay, like, you're gonna, when you come home from school, you're gonna make art. Cool, sounds good. The next week, you didn't do any art, what happened? And then we have a discussion about it. And it's like, when I get home from school, you know, I eat a snack and I pass out and take a nap. I'm like, well, obviously that's not a good time for you to make art. Like, maybe it should be after your nap, or maybe it should be something entirely different. And I tell them again, like, this is my routine, this is what works for me, but you need to figure out something that works, time of day, tying it to a particular activity.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Like like once again, I'm just like super stoked to see where it goes. And I'm also like stoked to see where your students, like how your students grow and evolve too. I think
Yeah.
it's probably really rewarding to see how they improve
Yeah.
and like develop over time. So I'm excited for you, Nate.
Sure.
That's awesome. But where can we find Draw Academy?
So it's drawacademy.net. There's information about classes and you can enroll there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, join Nate's, you know, professorship, teachership on Draw Academy and learn yourself some art fundamentals and deep skills, because I think it'll be really valuable if anybody, you know, listening is looking to level up their art skills or get started in their art skills and their art journey. You know, it sounds like an amazing class to take, and I'm just super happy to see it, you know, getting its legs and growing and developing. So thank you so much for joining us, Nate. I really appreciate the time. I learned a lot. I'm like really inspired right now.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so for everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to continue to follow Painted in Color, you can join our discussion group on the Painted in Color podcast discussion group on Facebook. Make sure you smash that like button. Subscribe. It's always so fun. I think you started this, Eric. This is your fault.
You gotta smash the like button.
Gotta smash the
Can't
like
just
button.
delicately touch it.
Yeah. But if you enjoyed what you see, seriously, please feel free to you know, leave a comment. You know, thank you for participating in the chat. And yeah, subscribe to our channel to see more updates of when we're airing new episodes. But thank you, everybody. And again, thank you, Nate, for giving us your time and your knowledge. I learned a lot. So yeah, everybody have a good one, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.